We're here with Dr. Lee, who has graced us with a wonderful presentation about grief and what grief looks like for young people in particular. And Dr. Lee, this might seem like a really basic question, but here it is. I think most of us who are watching this today have experienced grief at some point in our lives. Many of us quite recently. We're filming this in 2021 when the pandemic is very fresh in our minds and hearts. So we know what grief is, but can you speak about what is particular to young people experiencing grief? Does that population encounter grief differently than adults might?
Sure. I think the biggest difference is that for young folks, it might be their first time, their first experience with grief. And what that means is that there's no reference point. For folks who are a little older, perhaps the most recent grief experiences, say from COVID, we may have some other reference points we can compare and contrast. What does this grief look like compared to the last one? How did I get through the last one? How that will inform me to get through this one? Things like that. We have more information. For young people, they just don't have enough life experiences yet to have those reference points. So what that means is that it can feel quite daunting and in fact, quite scary. We also know for young people, emotions can be really big. And they're experiencing the emotion physiologically, but they may not have the cognitive ability to understand and unpack those emotional experiences. So it's a big, again, I describe it as being really daunting, overwhelming, and scary. And so when we're working with young people, it really is trying to help them understand what's happening in their bodies, where emotions might be sitting for them, how emotion may be showing up in other ways physiologically, or if they're having headaches, if they're having more stomach aches, they're having just more shakes or sweatier, whatever it might be showing up for them, but also begin to put some language for them in their minds cognitively to understand what that is. What does it mean when you get these butterflies? What does it mean when you get these sweating arms? Or what does it mean when you're getting stomach aches or backaches or headaches? And could that be a sign of some sadness that you're carrying or some anxiety you're carrying? So really trying to help young people put things together in a way that I think adults in our adult brain have easier time processing and unpacking. And for young folks, it's just harder.
That's so interesting. And it helps flesh out the experience of grief, because many of us as adults, we know this, right? Because it's not a first time experience, but for younger people, it will manifest in ways that they might not have language to be able to put around. So that's really helpful.
And I try when I'm working with young people to remind them too that, and I think it's important to remind us adults working with young folks, is that grief is a natural part of life, something that we will anticipate and expect to experience some point of our lives. Grief is very different than trauma, let's say. Trauma we're not supposed to experience. That is not okay, and it's not something that we should anticipate or expect. So it's very unfortunate when it does happen. That's trauma. Grief, however, whether it's grief for death or grief because of being lost of something or someone or some routine, some object, those are kind of natural parts of life. And so it's good for us working with young folks to know that we may be planting some seeds for them to understand what grief is for the rest of their lives.